My name's Carlo McCormick, and I want to welcome you all here. Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks to Jeffrey and Kathy and Ellery and everyone at the gallery for hosting us. Thanks really to Charlie for giving us some cause for collective celebration with this movie. And, let me really thank the panelists, because I've been hitting them up for favors for so long, and they still keep coming through and helping me out. So mad thanks. I'm going to do the briefest of intros, because you should kind of know who they are. And if not, pull out your smartphone. It's all good to Google. On the far end is KAWS, who we call Brian. Next to him is Futura, who we call Lenny. In the middle is Janette Beckman, who we call for inspiration. And right next to me is Haze, who we call Eric. So that's the IDs. I am really specific in my mind why I want to do it, but I'm horribly vague in terms of really how I want to do it. But this show was a chance to address all the great artists who were a part of Wild Style, of that family that made the movie. And then for me, I was thinking about, well, let's extend what Wild Style is, this really radical super ornate approach to letterism, and extend it into the notion of style. And then I thought about, well, the people I know who dominate style who are part of this show. So that's why you're here. And because I'm a geek and I like to go back, I want to think a little bit about style before y'all became so big, when style was DIY. When we all had to figure out how we were going to represent without being able to necessarily go to a store and do it with a brand. Maybe Janette, maybe you can start, because Janette photographed so many of the important hip hop stars, and I think at a time when they were all just figuring out their look, and you have all those skills to help people bring out their look. Can you talk about it a bit?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I came here in 1983 in January, and I kind of came here because I saw the first ever hip-hop show to come to London, which photos from over there. And I was super inspired because I met all these incredible people that were really different from the British punks that I'd been documenting for so long. And by then, 1982, punk was kind of on the wane. We were kind of fed up. It was all doom and gloom in England. And I went to a hotel where these hip hop people were staying. I was covering it for a Melody Maker magazine, and I met some amazing people, one of which is sitting right next to me here. And they were just they had so much style and attitude. That's all I have to say. And it was really different from what was going on in the UK. So I came here the next year and started to document everybody from LL Cool J to Run DMC to, all the people, the godfathers and godmothers, I think we can say.
Super cool. And there wasn't much of that style in the rest of the United States either, just to be clear. Eric, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you really inspired me years ago when you started explaining to me how the tag was kind of mimetically the same as a logo, and that the artist was going to repeat this thing, they were going to refine it to something that could be not only super fast to execute, but super kind of fast to read, and that this is really what every brand does in terms of that stuff. Can you talk to me about how this led you that way?
Well, style was sort of the foundation for everything. It was the first thing we aspired to, was to have style. That's how you identified each other, and it's how you tried to separate yourself from the pack. But to your point about logo, I think repetition and familiarity.
And saturation.
And saturation. You know, I think before we could articulate it or even sort of had a real sense of self, it was identity. You know, we were trying to convey our identity through a style that would, you know, allow us to sort of show our uniqueness. And as a logo designer, as a brand designer, the essence really isn't that different. It's what I call sort of driving it around the block over and over and over again until you kind of know it's coming around the corner before you even see it. So when it comes to whatever sort of uniqueness we were aspiring to or achieved, whether it was wild style or simple forms or throw-ups, it was the repetition and sort of continuity that gave it a different kind of gravity. The same way, ultimately, you look at I don't think there's a huge difference now between looking at the Wild Style logo or looking at the Nike logo. They're both ultimately very familiar, and they're symbolic of either.
Probably a couple billion dollars difference,
well, but the bottom line is you understand where they came from, you understand the history, you understand the identity. And someone once said something to me that I found so fascinating. They said, for a brand to be successful, it needs to be transparent. And you can interpret that a lot of different ways, but I interpret that you understand the identity that's at the core of the symbol. And yeah. I know that's something we've all aspired to in our careers.
Lenny, you know, you've been so migratory with style. Okay, in the future, speak more on the mic. I'm good. But the rest of you kind of speak up, you know. This is a big room. No, I was thinking you've kind of migrated through so many styles. You're just like a style master generator and stuff like that. But I kind of remember like Paper Magazine, where I used to work in '84 when we started. You were kind of one of our first covers. And it wasn't just because you were Futura 2000 and kind of famous. It was that you were representing bike messenger culture and that kind of that visual style. Can you talk about how some of these things have fed you and informed your work now or whatever?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah,
Yep.
no, amazing. We're going to get Brian in here in a minute.
Yeah, he's next.
No, just to say, guys, I mean, you know, I am, you know, from this city, and if you take it back 50 years, even prior to the birth of hip-hop, you know, I was trying to be a graffiti writer with the name Futura 2000. But about style and originality and trying to define oneself within a group, a very large group, you know, you had to offer something, which I think is immediately obvious. You know, you see it, it either has style elements. I mean, we all know our language, our alphabet. You know, we can see it translated through calligraphy style, whatever. But we know style when we see it, and as those individuals looking for identity, that was a big push for me. And the DIY thing is completely obvious because at the same time, in that moment, I'm coming from a low economic condition in that I grew up here. My parents never had a car. We lived just, you know, in a walk up, and the subway station of 103rd and Broadway was right on my corner. So inevitably, I became a subway rat and part of that whole story. But looking correct, having clean shit on and trying to look better, like you said, than it's like stand out from the pack. Like average for me was never going to be acceptable. The way to be non-average is like be a kook and just wear crazy shit and, you know, be the one freak in the crowd, which actually became a thing, right? Like that
I tried it.
Yeah. I mean, I have my moments too, trust me. I've tried so many things, and you know, this photo of you took of me, Janette, in London back in '82. It's like, you know, I'm wearing one of these, I think we call them sheepdog. They bought up at like Fordham Road in the Bronx. You know, it's just a kooky look for anyone. Although some kid could be dressed like that tonight and they'd be like, oh my God, your fit is... So who knows, right, what's going on in that? But I'm still searching for the, not evolution, because that's occurring without my assistance. That's like part of a greater thing, but my development as an artist. And yeah, I've digressed in the style hunt. You know, I default now to a kind of almost as like a uniform. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to think a lot. I think that's this, what is that, like the Steve Jobs approach, right?
Or the KAWS approach.
Or the KAWS approach, where it's like one less thing you actually have to worry about in your day. It's like, whereas back 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 30, 17, I was kind of super conscious of what I was wearing and how I would look. But trust me, that'll pass.
Yeah.
That will pass.
With age, all these vanities go. Brian, I really, you know, you've made so many incredible leaps as an artist and a person in the years we've known you. But I still think one of the great jumps you made as an artist was really early on when you started working on billboards. And if you're like an old kind of lefty intellectual like me, we call it détournement, which is what the situation is international, called this strategy of kind of fucking with pre-existing ads and things like that. And then, you know, as you develop from there, you started with a really interesting conversation you were having with the dominant culture and the fashion industry, and then you became part of it. But I think it's really, I'd like to know how and why you thought that, and because it was not just the tag originally, it was the tag with that other form of messaging.
Are you trying to skip talking about my style? Is that what happened?
No, man. Let's talk about that.
No,
and I actually have a specific one for you.
No, oh God. You know, I think it was just a sort of circumstance of where I grew up getting into painting over advertisements. It happened in just like looking for a great location and then eventually realizing this is something I'm more interested in than just, you know, doing traditional letter form graffiti. I had no idea at the moment that would lead into anything aside from getting great spots and visibility. And, you know, I moved from Jersey City to Manhattan in '96, and that kind of shifted me into working smaller on the phone booths and bus shelters. And it was like, you know, just something you realized along the way that this is actually now getting into something that's much larger, a larger conversation, more inclusive of more people outside of like the graphic community that I was in years prior. So I think step by step, I stumbled into things that led to other things, to put it simply.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was more intuitive than planned, and it sure worked. But I also think that, you know, so when we were kids and everyone hated graffiti, now they ride around in these branded subway cars, and some of the same people I knew who were like, "How do you like those hoodlums? I can't even see out the windows," or we're like that. I go like, "What do you feel about riding in an ad now?" They go, "I don't pay attention," and I kind of wish they didn't pay attention then. But I think we realize that like maybe part of the reasons have shifted for why people are doing this kind of mark making in public, because now their visual landscape's so co-opted. But that's not really a question for anyone, isn't it? That's just me rambling on.
You know, I think there's a sort of been a progression of self-awareness. Sort of Lenny and my generation, we were decidedly not self-aware and didn't start out self-empowered. And I always sort of look at it like the lights went on one day and we found ourselves naked on the playing field, and we had this baptism of fire where we had to figure out, oh, okay, we're in the middle of there's a game going on and we're part of it. What uniform do we put on? How do you score a goal? What do you get when you score a goal? And we really had to sort of figure everything out by the seat of our pants, coming from, a world where we took everything for granted and arrived in a place where we could take nothing for granted. And part of the reason I make that point is because I look at Brian as sort of one of the leaders of the next generation who, without judgment, had the benefit of sort of watching
all our mistakes.
Exactly. That it's the generation you describe now that sort of plays on a sort of different field by different rules has been a progressive awakening. I think we're many generations or steps past what I'd call Brian's generation or awakening, but that's been a progressive sort of understanding of the playing field.
Yeah, and in terms of like, this evolution, the genesis of it, we're actually, it's interesting because Haze and Futura are both really early in this game called streetwear, which is now, I guess, a multi-billion-dollar industry as well. And so I think of like, Lenny, you were part of GFS, and they were doing like, you were just hijacking shit. They were doing the Phillies Blunt logo, right? That was your first big thing. And
That's
Eric,
like appropriation slash, jump on something that we knew was, super, up on current as far as how weed was getting a huge, they were getting a big boost out of early hip hop lyrics. So it just seemed to weave nicely. Although we will admit, I think that that project for us was a double-edged sword in that people just saw us for that and didn't appreciate our creativity, maybe, But we learned computing, and that was essential into the 90s. That was a big part of another quote-unquote artist tool, I think, at least for me and Stash, we were part of that early story, and we continued that. And looking at Brian, I was saying, like, man, I know me and Eric met, late 79-ish? Earlier? Okay. Right after I came back from the Navy, which would have been 78. So, yeah, maybe earlier. And then I was like, oh, yeah, Brian, 96, 97, and you just confirmed that you did come to Manhattan in 96. Janette, I know, was 82. That's the rap tour. That was, locked in time. But just how we did transition out of that street art, independent clothing company culture, streetwear stuff. But it wasn't really until the year 2000, I believe, when I could see a marker on the change of our whole art story, in that with people like Brian arriving and other people, I could say Shepard and Banksy and, those people that were kind of coming of the end of that last century that really kickstarted for us this new, moment. And I mean, God, we're halfway into the 2020s already, so it's pretty crazy.
and you were all, because you also have that connectivity of Nego and Bathing Ape at that time, because they helped put you up. Brian, what year did you start Original Fake, which was your company, right?
That was way later. That
Way later.
was.
It's all a blur to me.
2003?
I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Honestly, I think it was 2000. Yeah, I don't know. No,
Okay.
6.
Oh,
New
that's
millennium.
2006.
My history is always really vague, but I do remember something really quite seminal was actually Keith Haring's Pop Shop, which I know you work with a bit, Eric, and but this was this really simple thing of like the T-shirt can be the canvas.
That was one of my first tees I did also. I did two
did one
tees
for
Keith. And yeah, I mean, that idea, of a retail shop, I mean, I don't think anybody was thinking, retail. And that's in the 80s, right? I mean, key shops in the mid 80s. Yeah.
I don't really think there was I tried to, I don't have real scholarship chops, but I tried to dig into the history. And for those who might be just coming back from the art fairs in Miami, the earliest kind of way I could find it was there were these resort kind of places back in the 50s, and all these snowbirds or whatever would go down there for the thing, and then they didn't really have really good beach clothes. So that one of the things they did is they started selling T-shirts with these resort, like the Sands or something like that, as a logo. And all the resorts use the same person, and then that person was like the schmata guy, and he struck a deal with Disney to do Mickey Mouse, and that's kind of the beginning.
Amazing.
As far as I can tell.
I'm gonna add a layer to that. It was sort of the mid to late 80s that I would say hip hop music collided with the surf skate industry in California. I had started going out to some of these trade shows, and Doze, for one, was living on the West Coast and working with Life's a Beach. And I started working with Vision Streetwear in 1987. And, you know, Sean Stussy would, by all accounts, be sort of the first model for what I would consider streetwear before it was called streetwear. But I remember a moment in time when we were out in California at the trade shows, sort of having a light bulb moment, realizing what Sean had translated from surf culture and his style sort of had a parallel platform for what we were just starting to do coming from graffiti and hip hop. And I remember sort of hanging out with the Hossois and Gonzes and the Skate Kids, and they were just hearing Public Enemy and the Beastie Boys for the first time. And in my mind, it was the music that collided with the fashion, sort of right at the flashpoint of my Adidas, which sort of broke the game open as a market. So there's an interesting timeline from, say, 86, 87 to the 90s when people started actually calling it streetwear.
Did you recognize that, Janette, like the DIY thing, that like it's like a crass homemade T-shirt or something? This whole development.
Totally, and he's right about the My Adidas thing, because wasn't that like one of the first collaborations? I mean, that made, because I took a picture of Run DMC in '84, and they were wearing Adidas, but they'd not done that collaboration, so they were kind of famous in Queens, but not really, you know, much else. And then suddenly they blew up at that concert, that famous concert, right? Didn't they ask everybody to hold up their Adidas at the concert, and it just blew up? But yeah, and suddenly you'd see people like bands. If you could get a band to wear your T-shirt, I think that was a huge thing, right?
Like, did you go? I mean, because we actually got to know each other because we both worked for Paper,
85, yeah.
Which was like, you know, kind of editorial, but very, very fashion based as well. Did you notice that as a photographer through the years, how people started putting things on, like for props and for all that stuff?
Oh, totally. And it was really, people were just wearing different T-shirts and T-shirts with, you know, brand names on them, or, you know, a graphic by maybe one of you guys, I don't know. But and once that was on stage, that thing became huge, right? I mean, I think that's kind of, I totally noticed that. And, you know, back in the day when I was taking those photos, we didn't have stylists. Because there was no money, so all these artists were new. Like nobody brought a selection of Kangols for LL to wear on his first press shoot that I did. He just turned up like that. And I think the people had their own style. Salt and Pepper, when I took that picture of them, you know, they turned up in those jackets. I didn't have anything to do with it. There was no stylist there. Those things are made by Dapper Dan. I mean, it was, and it's only later that you realize how important it was that they just turned up like that.
Dapper Dan's super cool for those who maybe don't know that bit of history, but I wonder if you guys ever looked at like that kind of customizing culture as a seed to this.
Dapper Dan's an interesting sort of case study in fashion, because I wanted to go back to what Lenny was saying about appropriation. You know, the very first wave of what we call streetwear was really
Stoner also, appropriation.
But hip hop music and rap started to become fundamentally built on sampling, in a real sort of postmodern kind of sensibility. And I know for myself, and I think for our generation, we sought to kind of capture that visually in the same way it was being done sonically. I know I
Yeah, that was before clear all samples. Yeah, everybody was snatching stuff, right? I mean, the most notable, when you mentioned trade shows and Sean, of course, like Sean's still, revered, I think, in our, counterculture as, a godfather, no doubt. But, yeah, I mean, the ripping off, I think the Eric Bernetti fucked Ford is probably the cleanest one, you could come away with. But then it's almost like we should have stopped right there, right?
and
That should have ended it.
Brian picked it up in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, way later, the first exhibit I did was with Russ from Sir.
Yes.
Ricky Powell invited me
Amazing.
to
That's
show
right.
it in his shop.
Wow.
And at the time,
Shout out to Russ.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
I mean, you see the Ford logos in the Basquiat Warhol collection as well. It's not like Ford's immune to being yoinked or whatever. And then you were talking about, pardon me, Brian, you were talking about advertisement and how the logo or our styles, tags, whatever, our signature becomes that thing. And one of my good friends named Mark Edmonds, rest in peace, Ali, he was telling me in the very beginning when we were toys coming up in the early 70s that graffiti was similar to advertising and how we were confronted with advertising, whether it's in the public space like a subway system, the advertisements, the interiors of the cars, whatever, everybody's selling you shit. And he said, I didn't ask for that, right? That's unwanted. Therefore, why can I not put my tag here as well to identify me as an individual, not a product? I'm not for sale, but I do exist. And so, I mean, there is something I think even still to this day that I get a real kick out of seeing my signature on shit because it's like, wow, that's the essence, I guess, of the whole thing. And at a certain point when I risk arrest and or what have you over maybe doing that in a public space, people would actually pay me for that. And not in a cheesy kind of like, oh, you're a washed up baseball player, you sign cards. Au contraire, like, I'm like revered kind of thing by comparison, which I just think is kind of awesome, actually.
I think Joe DiMaggio used to charge a lot of money for his autograph. Don't sneeze
Did he?
at that. Yeah.
But he very well should have.
Yeah, he
so
should.
did
Yeah.
Stay High.
So to stay high, exactly. And oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I could ramble with you all night. But back to Wild Style, the film. Can we shout out? Well, Stay High may have not made a physical appearance in it, but I know Ramel Z did, and I know Dondi did, and I do with Ram's work here. I just want to say, unbelievable. Friends of mine, obviously they're not here, and sometimes I tend to want to also remember these individuals, because they played a significant role, no doubt.
And they both had insane style.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing Dondi's master cylinder, right? It's like, man, like, was I there when he painted that? Like, maybe, So it just gives me chills sometimes when I see the old work and whatever. It's kind of great, guys, to having, my kind of story and be up here with Brian and Eric and Janette and you too, Carlo, because you're kind of like, and you introed everyone, and he forgot to mention, like, oh yeah, Carlo did curate this show as well. Thanks, Charlie. And thank you, Jeffrey, of course, for providing, the awesome venue. And when I came tonight, the last time I was here was the opening, which I still think was like just the craziest night, and that was over like a month or more ago. So, but whatever, just to be here and to be one of the individuals from this whole amazing story, and once again, I mean, Janette, you arrive at a fantastic moment for us because this is when we were exported, right? And, you know, rap music was already kind of something that people could either hear on the radio or hear in the club. But this collective that they had organized, I don't want to give credit to anyone, but the fact that we were there then and had a wonderful trip, and then possibly inspired you. Like you said, you're all living in your you know, London's not a bad spot to obviously be from, and there you are. And then here we come with the nutty costumes and outfits and people like spinning on their heads. And, you know, I really think it must have been crazy, but thank you for, you know, thinking we were interesting enough to want to move over here, and you've been here ever since. So
Honestly, what
Thank
really
you.
was, I mean, we didn't have rap music in Europe. And when you guys came, I mean, it was really like a renaissance, as he said, like people spinning on their heads, double dutch dancers, like rapping. We didn't know what rapping was. We didn't know what scratching was, none of it. And just the look of what you guys were wearing. I mean, I just put something up on my Instagram about your Raiders hat. I mean, it was just so different.
And that was 92, so I would have been rocking a hat either from that year or the year before. And I was trying to figure out, were the Raiders, because they were Oakland, they went to LA, they went back to Oakland.
Right.
You know, we know they're in
That'd be
Vegas.
Oakland.
But I think they were actually in Oakland. And I wrote a name on, I commented on your comment, and I wrote Fred Bolitnikoff. It's
Right.
like, what
I
who the
saw
fuck
that.
is
So
Fred
good. I had to look
But like
him up.
he's a Hall of Fame guy from the Raiders, and also extrapolate from that, John Madden, you know, Madden football. Raiders were huge. So you know, and when did they win? I guess the years I was in high school. Hey,
I love where you go out there.
sorry, yeah, I do.
It's really good.
I jump on a trawler.
But we got close to something I kind of wanted to hear Brian talk a little bit about when we were talking about appropriation,
His style.
or in his case, mediation, which is a little different than what Warhol was doing. He's mediating it. And I remember like you talking to me about some of the characters you work with, that you really rely on their familiarity as a kind of a way to access people with maybe weirder stuff or with your own shit. Can you talk a little bit about how appropriation has been working for you?
I think just with the advertisements, I realized there's a whole language that you could work within, and you know, there's such familiarity with these images now, especially even from when, you know, I started painting over billboards in '93. Everything's changed so much with the accessibility of imagery at this moment, and I just think of sort of these sort of global images as bridges to people and experiences, and to work within that language and kind of create a new language from it was something I focused on. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. Sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know if this, you can humor me for this. I thought it might be interesting if each of you could talk just a little bit about the work you put in the show and kind of where it's coming from, what you're thinking, maybe why you thought it would relate to this exhibition. Is that like lame, or is that kind of interesting?
It's not lame, but
Okay.
before we do that, I wanted to sort of reinforce Lenny's point about Carlo and his importance in our community, and the fact that whether it's movies or journalism, and equally to Jeffrey, who's been an amazing supporter of the culture in a broad stroke and individually to people. But you know, we've all known, Carlo and I have been friends since we were teenagers, and we've all known each other this long. And I think, besides the fact that we're surprised to still even be here,
A little worse for wear.
you know, to me, on top of the importance of the movie Wild Style, I think it's really brilliant how Carlo chose to curate this sort of above and beyond just the movie itself, to have this exhibition and perhaps this panel represent our generation and our community sort of having gelled and come of age at this point in time, which I can't really say was necessarily always true. I think, you know, maybe I'm speaking for Lenny and myself that, you know, when we were younger, graffiti was sort of a solo or small crew kind of sport. We didn't grow up necessarily with a sense of community and the tools to play nice in the sandbox that way. And I think it's this show, to me, and the opening that Lenny was describing was really sort of a magic moment and marker in time that, you know, all these disparate elements have grown together and understood as a community and understood as a movement.
And that has a lot to do with the spirit of the movie, and that, which has a lot to do with its durability. But just real briefly, this was in some ways the easiest show ever, because all I had to do was go to the artists and say, we're doing a movie to honor this movie, to honor Charlie, and we're doing it at Jeffrey Deitch. So a lot of people who would probably, if I asked them to be in a group show in Soho, would be like, yeah, Carlo, I'll get back to you on that. We're like, yeah, no, it'd be an honor. And I think y'all, one of the reasons I want to ask you about your work is everyone came up with really exceptional work, which makes me look better, and I'm glad to take credit for it, but it's really about you guys. So is it all right? Just like, Janette, you've already talked a little bit about it. Maybe just.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just lucky enough to have met all of you guys. I met you at Paper, Charlie, and I connected, I guess, over hip hop. And you know, I have to give a shout out to Say, because of the mashup project that we did. It started 2014, and I met a lot of graffiti artists that I didn't know because I wasn't documenting graffiti. And, you know, I mean, it seems like a big family to me as a, you know, I'm still not from here. I didn't start off with you guys, but I think you're right about the show. It just seems to have built this incredible kind of community and family, and everybody's so happy to be around each other. And that's a very rare thing. So I'm very lucky to have my pieces that I shot in 1982. And, you know, thank you, Carlo, for including, thank you, Charlie, over there. And that's it, yeah.
Janette and I shared space on an album cover in the 80s.
Oh, that is wild, yeah.
We've only been friends for a couple of years, and we didn't meet until recently, but I was always aware of Janette because she took the photo for the EPMD cover, which I did the logo for. So we've been occupying the same space for decades without knowing each other.
It's so wild. I just found out he did that logo a month ago.
He did a lot of logos.
I know, but it's so crazy because that's one of the most important logos. Talk about style. That is one of the most important logos in hip hop, I think.
And Lenny, we've shared a lot of weed dealers over the years, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. No, I want to talk about my piece, actually. Hey, hello. So I'm very happy because, yeah, I get the ask from Carlo, and even if it wasn't Jeff's spot, I was going to be in on this with Charlie and the history. But I did a painting, it's right over there, it's called the Dixie Club. And sadly, I'm not in really Wild Style as one of the characters, but I do make a cameo appearance in the film, 1 minute 42. I'm teasing. Just to say that I am in it. I have a moment behind Fat Five Freddy, AKA Fade in the movie. And it's I think Cold Crush are performing. It's just a great scene in the movie. And I'm there with Dondi and I think another artist named Deal. But we're just cameo in the background. So the two greatest documentations of, let's say, this New York City school, if you will, Wild Style, without question. I have a little cameo. And Style Wars, which Eric knows a little bit about, being in. And I'm in a outtake shot on the boat at the end of the film. So just like couldn't get in these movies, couldn't get in The Faith of Graffiti, the first publication that I guess came out in '73. And, you know, first generation, I got a whack little tag in the Subway Art, First Testament, thankfully, that thing lasted a long time, and I am in the 25-year anniversary, like, large format. But, yeah, for a guy that got left out of shit, I'm here. So, thank you.
And you told me you were kind of channeling Dondi.
Well, I was thinking of Dondi, right? And, oh, yeah, so I tried to do this, well, whatever. I did this painting here. But I was trying to do something like old, right? Like, what would Futura paint? I mean, I tried to go back. It's very difficult. You know, even though I'm looking at a photograph of an old painting, I just still couldn't do it. But I was thinking about Dondi, and I most certainly fooled someone. Lee Quinones saw it. He's like, oh, wow, Lenny, is that one of your older paintings? And, you know, bingo. So that theme I was going for, you know, just kind of bite my old style, maybe worked a little bit. It fooled Lee, so.
There we go. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Inside job.
Does anyone want to add to that or any of this stuff? I did take notes.
Yeah, no.
Please, Brian.
Brian, please.
No, I just, you know, when Carlo called me, I was going to pass an opportunity up to show with you guys. And, I mean, it's like here I'm in the room with a lot of my heroes. And, you know, you've been supportive since I moved to Manhattan, giving me free drinks at Max Fish, you know.
That's how I made all my friends.
And, no, you put me at the table with a bunch of interesting people. And, you know, I just found, like, this is a great opportunity to show in this context, and it's an honor.
It's nice, and you know, we've also got Martin Wong on the show, and you're in here in a similar way, like Os Gemios is, as people who kind of took this thing to another level. But you're also in here in a way that Martin Wong is in this show, as two people who had tremendous success with their own studio practices and just paid forward and backwards in every which way to like support this community. You've supported these people like so deeply and so personally. So,
Thank you.
and this is New York. We should be like hating on each other instead of blowing smoke up each other's ass. But you go ahead.
So just want to reinforce the same that you know, when you asked me to be in the show, it was an automatic, amazing yes to be included with this roster of people, and to show in Jeffrey's gallery for the first time was amazing for me. Also, you know, I think it's important to note that we were not in Wild Style. That, you know,
He was.
Technically, Lenny straddled. Lenny was an extra in both. That's right. But seriously, you know, when you said it's the Wild Style show, but it doesn't have to be uber specific to Wild Style or the period in which it was made, then it really opened it up in a big way. And I just chose to to put brand new work that was sort of as wild as my style gets these days.
Yeah. And that was a conversation, real briefly, that I just had with Charlie at the beginning, and Jeffrey was part of that too. Is it like, it's not a cast party, it's about a community and all the kind of levels of exchange. So, but not to belabor that. I should open it up to questions soon, but I thought I'd ask you guys something really wonky and weird, because I haven't done that yet. But when I was a kid, one of the books that changed my life was by this nutty amphetamine addict British intellectual named Dick Hebdige. And he wrote this book called Subculture, The Meaning of Style. That's 1979. And what he's really talking about, he's talking about punk and skinheads, but he's also talking about like the Jamaican culture, growing up, you know, and all these things. And he's talking about the ways, it's the first time anyone ever talked about like how kids dress and what it means and how they're signifying. And his whole thing was about, it was a form of resistance. It was a way of individuating your tribe as something distinct from dominant culture, from the inherent norm core of what you get at the mall. And I don't know. I just guess I want to ask you all: is that still a possibility? Is that just like something that weird old guys like me think about late at night, or is it? Is there a way that which style can still be subversive?
I kind of hope that there's a whole thing going on that we're just not privy to. I like to, people like to reminisce about certain moments. I grew up as a 90s writer, so I got a lot of stories about the 80s. Push forward a few decades, and then suddenly you realize it's actually not that much of a difference in timing, but a lot has happened. And I'm sure there's kids that are entering now that are doing exciting things, and we shouldn't be in the room with them. They're doing their thing. And we're going to see that unfold in the next 5-10 years, and they'll be talking about their influences.
Right on. And you were like a club kid also, so you had like some style roots there too. But we won't talk about that. I haven't seen the photos.
No, you haven't. They don't exist.
But there's also like that generation, whatever, Generation Z, I don't know what letter we're at now, but I mean, they also have such a respect for old T-shirts, like old vintage Run DMC T-shirts or something. Like my friend Oliver has a store on Bowery, and you can go buy those people. It's not people of my generation buying them. It's people in their 20s. So I mean, there is that too. It's kind of like throwback, cool style, maybe. I don't know.
I agree with Brian. After a solid, steady year of Hip Hop 50, where we're having Old Timers Day regularly, including today, I'm looking forward to seeing what the next generation can do, sort of ripping up our model and creating their own the way we did in our time.
And I do think it's interesting that Janette brings up these perpetual nostalgias, which are slowly choking us. But it brings in one other weird thing that really informed fashion as much as you guys informed it, which was kind of collectible culture. Like Lenny, you're a really early arriver in Japan. Brian kind of, he's one of those guys who gets famous in Japan before he does in New York. You got your history, but that was like this kind of really ultra fetishized idea of like something which had passed and which was precious, like whether it was an old toy or whatever.
I mean, I'm kind of lucky that there was, what Lenny was doing, what Stash was doing. This was here when I entered, so there's already like a thread, a bridge. And I got to just observe and build and, work on that with reference points that they didn't have. And then now going forward, there's much more in the conversation, and people have several reference points to go from. So.
Well, it's interesting, Carlo, talking about how Brian may have gotten famous in Japan. We got famous in the UK and in Europe, right? I mean, right. Similar to, the way, let's just say, people of color, musicians in our previous generation of mine, who were isolated to places they could be accepted here in this country. I mean, the point is America's like late in the game to finally embrace us. And yeah, it's an overkill this year of Hip Hop 50 because it's a hard number to ignore. And you have like half the advertising I hear on radio or certainly TV and streaming, a lot of hip hop artists getting paid this year for jingles and whatever, referencing their music. But just to say that, yeah, I mean, thank God the Europeans embraced us. Thank God the Dutch, the French. I mean, the French still got a hard on for graffiti. They're just like crazy. But just that the world, ultimately, way before the Americans looked at us, embraced us. And yeah, I got a big jump out of Japan. I got a big jump out of the UK in the 90s, but it was late on arrival as far as American support, i.e. brands, if you will. That's the new game in town. But just American investment, and even as much as not a brand, but an American citizen. Like, where's my American buyers at? right? So
Yeah.
it's sad. I mean, that's kind of sad, actually, that they were never really there for us.
Well, to
Now they're stumbling over themselves to take credit for, whatever.
and turning that on its head a little, I think when we got to Japan in the early 90s, there was no Japanese market. There were no Japanese brands.
Yep.
So everything we touched sort of turned to gold right away because we were a very small import culture. But in short order, in the mid 90s, labels like Bape
Yep.
recreated themselves sort of in our image and sold our style back to us to
Sure.
some degree.
Sure.
So it's a cycle with
Yeah.
Japan and Europe.
Hey, I was on a trip with Wild Style. Charlie will eyewitness it. I think it was 84. 83. Thank you, Charlie.
Tokyo, right?
Curator of Wild Style.
There you go.
The first place it was shown in the world
Was in Japan. Was that Osaka or Tokyo?
You were in the center of that.
Thank you, Charlie. I was.
And you would have did that?
That's right.
Not in the 90s. We're talking 1983.
Thank you, Charlie.
The center of that work.
Have a seat, Mr. Ahern.
No, it's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Charlie's so good because he not only corrects me on the years, he'll put a month.
Skirting out in the outer
Yeah, well,
much, not so much.
thank you, Charlie. Yeah, no, but just to say, Japan was super important, and yeah, I mean, they came strong in the 90s, and once again, get into our 21st century.
And just a little other context, since I actually work in the art world, is that like as late sometimes as America can be on stuff, one of the things I really adore about my community, the art world, is how fucking clueless and late they are all the time. It's so great. Like for years they've been like, what are you looking at? And I'll be like, and they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? And then there'll be some kid who like, the kid who works in the mailroom kind of thing going like, right on, so glad you like that. But the art world it's really late arrivers. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just felt obliged to say that for whatever reason. Do we have you guys going to humor some questions from the audience? Or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right? You're all right with that? Should have asked you
Sure.
first instead of put you on the spot.
That's okay.
I could be like,
I can run your mic.
yeah, you run the mic.
Okay. Hi. I just want to say that I love all of you guys. I'm like, as an artist, I'm inspired by each and every one of you, especially you, Janette. I love you. And
too.
I was wondering, one of the reasons why I love you guys so much is because you all use so many different types of canvases. It's not just always a square on the wall. Like you were saying, it's like t-shirts, it's sculptures, it's so many different things. And I also see all of you as rule breakers. And so I'm wondering, like even back then and now when you're making work, are there any rules that you're thinking of, or are you just doing whatever you want to or whatever comes into your imagination?
For me,
You invent rules for yourself.
in graphic design, there are a lot of rules, and there's a lot of there is right and wrong. In artwork, there's no right and wrong, and there's no rules. I think a simple answer for me is that I try and stay motivated about what I can't see yet, and in a mindset that the next thing coming around the corner might be the most amazing. I don't want to use the word opportunity, but sort of moment in time or piece of work in time. And I spent a lot of time when I returned to painting sort of having this conversation in my head about what should be next, what's expected, what's not expected, what's sort of true to my history as a designer when I start painting. But I finally reached a place where I stopped having these conversations in my head and sort of freed myself up to just follow my muse and not be so concerned with what was sort of a progression or handcuffed by any history in any true sense.
I don't know. I just, I'm a documentary photographer, portrait. So for me, there's no rules, and I can just, if I'm in the mood, I'll just go out, take the train, go somewhere in New York City. It's like the greatest place in the world, and go take pictures. And every day you see something amazing on the train or, on the street. It's so I don't know about rules, but New York's always breaking rules. I think just all of you guys.
I am a spontaneous combustion translated to artist medium stuff, artist tools. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen in an hour. I don't know what's going to happen in a week. So when I approach my artwork, I just do it. There's no rules. It's like, nope.
I just try to keep it interesting, so I move around a lot.
Hey, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate the talk. I did have a question. So you talked a lot about co-opting billboards and the intent behind them. How do you feel now about the full circle moment where advertisers are coming in and trying to leverage the work that you're doing or that street artists are doing? Do you feel like that almost erodes the subversive nature of street art? And does that even matter?
I think at the time when I could speak for myself, when I was painting over billboards, there was not a street art frenzy. It seemed very out of place and uncommon for an ad to be altered. So I felt like I was doing something and I was excited by that. And that was my only opportunity to have a conversation with the public. That was my outlet. As things change, as I change, I just follow what the sort of gateways are, like what other ways can I reach them? Like my goal was always communication. And I'm not against, obviously I do a lot of commercial projects. I enjoy it. I find it disseminates my work in different ways that was never capable. Like I never had that access when I was younger. And I just try to think about how I can reach people and in what ways I can reach people. And for me, selecting the projects is very personal, and I feel like there is a sort of a way that things fit together that makes sense in my mind. And so we're not in 93, so I kind of work with 2023.
I just want to wade into that real briefly because what you're talking about is really, it's a question I think puzzles and perplexes us all, sometimes to existential degrees. But we should realize that street art is a constantly morphing thing, and right now, our view of it is because murals have become the dominant thing. But there's a lot of weird people doing kind of really fucked up things along the way. They're just not part of like a growing industry that supports it, which also has real estate interests, so it becomes placemaking. And I'm not hating on any of it. I'm just saying that when we think about street art, like we've got to think beyond what just graffiti is and beyond what murals are and beyond all these different things and realize that people have been addressing public space in really weird ways for a really long time. And if we're only seeing one thing, we're probably looking in the wrong direction.
Well, that one thing is, it's like it's a pot of gold. It's like a rainbow. It's like some reward right at the end of the rainbow. And sadly, I think and it's this is really conflicting for me. Is and I complain about it a lot. It's like wow, sometimes everything just seems to be a damn commercial transaction, right? And it just take a little bit of the. It's not fun, but I mean, man, you ruin the spirit of what I think being creative and wanting to communicate really is about. So, even now, whatever niveau or wherever you think I'm at, I'm still grappling with it's this balance now that you kind of try to maintain to where it just doesn't get out of control, where it just doesn't feel like, oh man, because how could I have been a person that came from willing to give it away to just want to cash out at the window, you know? So I'm doing charitable things, thanks to Brian. I'm being, what's that called? You know, I'm trying to be supportive of other young creative people and help them in their journey as well right now. So that's some way I can, like, I don't know, feel more positive about my success.
Do we have time for one more?
Moses?
Yes.
Sal, you're one of the original kids from the old neighborhood.
Yes, Sal and I grew up on the same block, West 88th Street, and he was one of the most creative, most important members of a seminal graffiti group called Noga on the Upper West Side.
That's right. Shout out to Noga.
Jeez. Thank you guys. I appreciate that. I appreciate this talk. And in the spirit of Futura and the name Futura, looking forward with things that have changed, you know, be it AI now,
Yep.
tools like that, or maybe, you know, a new movie that captures this moment now.
Sure.
And Charlie.
Yep.
And, you know, things of that nature that are happening. How do you see the future?
Well, it's funny you mentioned AI and everybody's obvious awareness, you know, ChatGPT, whatever, people talking about it right now. And the movie I saw in 1968 when I was 13 called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Shout out to Stanley Kubrick and all his great work. The main protagonist of the film was a computer called HAL 9000. He was pretty fucking smart. So the idea that AI or this concept to me is nothing new, right? I mean, look at look at dumb AI like GPS or Waze, or, you know, look at these things that have been in our system now for 5 to 10 years. It's all there. It's just not really being bigged up to where now it's threatening people's jobs and shit. But yeah, the future I think is fine, you know, because ultimately, yeah, I got into an elevator in Miami where you press a key card on the way out to tell it where you want to go, and you get in the elevator, there's no buttons to press. This part of AI, you got to work on that. That's not really user-friendly, but we can't fight the inevitable, right? I mean, we're going there, so put on your seatbelt.
I'd like to think we can fight it a little, otherwise they're just going to steal our fingerprints. I mean,
Yeah, okay.
how would you feel if AI imported all the galactic isms and
Right.
ladderisms? And,
Knew how to do all that?
What if AI captured the nuance of your paintings and could create future paintings when you're gone? Now that's a mixed blessing, but I'm
50
saying.
years from now, Eric, you're probably right. You'll have a machine that can actually do that.
because that's what the movie strike was about. The ultimate point of that whole strike was not to allow the movie companies to completely replicate people's voices
Sure.
and personalities. With
Like,
AI.
NIL type shit. But I will, in 50 to 100 years when that is happening, you know, rather than getting live people to do dead people's art, they'll have AI to do it. But I will also, my generational whatever legacy will have great attorneys to battle in that game, and I want to get my descendants and, you know, knuckleheads get paid.
Fair enough.
AI attorneys as drones. They'll just fly in and make a deal.
Did you see the drones last night at that game in Miami? There was like a couple thousand of them flying in formation, just doing computer, like the NFL logo and all kinds of shit to perfection. That's a little scary, actually.
So he mentions like 2001. He probably thought Hal was cool.
I thought Hal was amazing.
Yeah, right. So, but I just remembering running into you on the street, like I think it was in front of 51X on St. Mark's, and you were painting like windows on a sunny day. So it was like as close as an atheist like me can have a religious experience because the sun was shining through it.
Yeah.
But you had just seen Tron.
Yes, that's probably 1984.
84. Yeah.
And I thought about that too the other day. Like people are now presenting these hologrammy type immersive things, and I'm like, dude, you're like 40 years late. Like all these things are great that they've integrated it into creative hands and shit, but the application or the origins of such, I think I'm old enough to call people on stuff sometime as far as when they think they did it, but they've only regurgitated, something.
Yeah.
Whoa. Should I have said thrown up?
Yeah, it was a shout out.
Oh. Shout out to regurgitation.
I know for me, as the computer era was ushered in, and especially in the last 20 years, it made me want to lean harder into doing things by hand. It's part of what made me return to painting, was the sense that the world is increasingly operating off a box with a menu, and that ultimately we all have access to the same menu, which must be a path to mediocrity. So
But that's the
technology has, to me, technology says we have to lean into what's non-tech. And
So what do you do with the generation that's up and running, whether it's X, Y, or Z, that doesn't know how to default back to a plan that may fail or some system that will... I think kids today, if they don't have access to the internet, can get a little frustrated quickly. And quite frankly, I'm almost grateful sometime when there's like droppages where it's now taken out. It's like me choosing what I'm going to wear. I don't have to worry about being online. I can't be. You see what I mean? So, but I think that's kind of, hurtful now for folks.
Just a couple of things. First of all, like if anyone's ever looked at Haze's early work, it's almost unbelievable that it's done
By hand?
Yeah, by hand without a computer. It's so precise. But then I just thought I'd ask you, Janette, as somebody, because you'd be more on the ground for it than us. Now everyone has a camera in their pocket.
Yeah, digital
and
rules.
a lot of people think they're photographers without maybe quite, enough reason to believe in themselves. But what do you think? Do you feel like your visual world is subsumed with anyone can do it?
I kind of love the idea that everybody can be a photographer. Use your cameras. Take your phones out. Take pictures. It's great. And maybe you are photographers. If you're taking a picture, you're a photographer. And who's to say what the level of taste is? Who am I to say, well, I'm better than you because I've been doing it for 40 years. Maybe you just took the best picture of 2023. I'm all for that, but I think, if you think AI is going to take over in 50 years, it's taking over next week. And as far as, Photoshop can already put Trump's head on my LL Cool J picture if they want to. And it's very easy, we can all do that, but it's gotten really extreme now, and I think, not to get all political, but we need to watch out for it, what is real and what isn't real, and
deep fake.
It's an issue.
Really good. Should we end it on that positive note, or
we could?
No, he really wants to ask a question.
Could.
Let's get. He really wants to. Go ahead.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
One more, people. Thank you so much to you five for coming. My question's for Brian, and my name is Julio. I'm actually releasing a designer toy in spring of 2024. So my question is pertaining to the current climate of designer toys. What's your take on almost the saturation of each designer toy almost looking like a mimic of each other? And my second question would be, if you had to choose in terms of the familiarities of your characters, since you said it reached out to a lot of the masses, would you still choose to stick with the familiar characters, or would you have rather chosen originality? Thank you so much.
I'd just say good luck.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's a great answer. Thanks, everyone.